How Stereotypes Come to Be, a TOK presentation by Brian Fee, Hannah Collins, and Ainsley Gordon.
People have been discriminated by ride-hailing drivers from companies like Uber, Lyft, and etc. A recent study demonstrated how these apps show racism towards men and women with black-sounding names. African American customers had to wait up to 35% longer than average for their ride, says a recent study done by Charlie Sorrell. The study was done in Boston and Seattle and found that in both of the cities, African Americans had to wait longer for their rides, and rides were often canceled after drivers saw black-sounding names.
When we first encountered our real-life situation, we had multiple questions about why this was happening. Why do these stereotypes occur? How do these stereotypes occur? How many stereotypes are there? Can we stop these from forming? In the following presentation, we will explore some of the stereotypes today and focus our discussion on the racial stereotypes of African Americans.
After seeing our real-life situation, we came up with a knowledge question. To what extent is the stereotyping of people influenced by language? We concluded that language and stereotypes are directly linked, with language deeply affecting these stereotypes and help keep them or break them. The areas of knowledge, like ethics and history, will help us explore the knowledge question and see if stereotyping is ethical or is it just a part of our culture today. History will be able to help us determine if stereotyping has just started to become prevalent in our society, or has it been established in previous generations. The ways of knowledge that we will be exploring are sense perception, language, intuition, reason, and memory. With the help of these, we will be able to determine how stereotypes are developed and encouraged to exist. Language helps influence stereotypes because of the huge impact it has on us today in our society. Language strongly affects stereotypes. While there may be some language sources that try to diffuse it, there ultimately is too much negative. This can be seen in a multitude of media, which news, social media being the most influential. Twitter and Instagram are apps where you can express your point of view and opinion freely. You can basically post anything you want. The flaw is there are so many people who like to post racist tweets and pictures. These racist stereotypical tweets and pictures mansplain people of different races and beliefs that differ from the tweeter's own. Memes of the successful black guy is a more harmless stereotype. This stereotype shows that at first thought, there's no way that someone of a colored skin could ever possibly become wealthy and successful. This brings humor to and addresses these stereotypes. This can be seen as something that is somewhat addressing the racism now, but it still fans the flames of this controversial topic. Tweets on Twitter, however, are nothing in comparison. These can show anything the tweeter wants to show and say whatever the tweeter wants to say. Many rude and horrible tweets have been found online from across the U.S. Most of them use very foul language, so they all cannot be shown in its presentation. By searching ghetto on Google Images, the first picture to pop up are two black guys together in a photo. This shows how we have changed the word ghetto and how we changed the way we perceive it. Instead of thinking of locations and slums, people automatically think of people now. This changed the definition of ghetto from a part of a city, especially a slum area, to poor or relating to the poor life. This means that the black people are perceived as relating to the poor life. 25% of people who live in poverty don't even get a high school degree, with less than 5% of them getting a bachelor's degree. This can show that poverty or ghetto-ness is linked directly to education. Education allows better jobs, which leads to money. This shows, based off the media, that blacks will primarily be below a normal white person.
Blackish is a TV show that directly addresses these stereotypes that are formed in our modern day. This show is a show that depicts an upper-class white-collar family and the inequality that they face on a daily basis. While these racism and stereotypical point of views of another character towards them is minute, mostly there still are some spots in the show that addresses the stereotypes head-on. These episodes will have all of the stereotypes towards the family confronted and resolved in the conclusion of the show. This is so it can be able to break the mental image and stereotypical schema one has on someone of African American race.
The case of Trayvon Martin is a memory that most people can recall very well. Martin was an unarmed African-American male who was killed over a robbery that he was falsely accused of committing. This was, and is not, the only unarmed African-American who was killed because of something uncalled for. There has been racism forever. Many recent events have brought this to surface. You can relate this to history in which slavery was shown as a sort of quote-unquote white power. We relate African Americans to how they are portrayed and seen in our point of view. This means that our memory is connected to our sense perception. Since there was always racism and inequality dating back to pre-Civil War, it is quote-unquote justified in doing what we do now. Someone could say how it isn't because the mass amount of segregation or racism is not violent and is still better than the lynching in the past, but people still think they can justify their racism with past knowledge. There are many horrid pictures that can be seen of lynching, most too brutal and inhumane to show.
The Charleston Church Massacre was a mass shooting that took place at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in downtown Charleston, South Carolina, during a prayer service. This church is a known black church. This is the oldest black church formed for black freedom. 9 people were killed by a gunman, Dylan Roth. One of the people to die was the senior pastor and state senator, Clementa C. Pinckey. Once the murderer was caught, he confessed that he was hoping to start a race war. A race war is known as an ethnic conflict, where people of different races fight to hold their spot in society. He was hoping to destroy all of the steps towards equality the blacks had gained since the 13th Amendment. Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock said, "This attack on the black church is really an assault against that which is our first freedom movement." Obama says, "These are senseless murders." Martin Luther King Jr. is most likely known by more people than Booker T. Washington. He had a PhD in theology. He believed the only moral way to end segregation and racism was through nonviolent passive resistance. His role model was another peaceful theologist named Mahatma Gandhi. He was part of the Civil Rights Movement. This was a movement that helped promote blacks and make them more equal. Blacks took a huge step forward during this with the Montgomery bus boycott, Brown versus Board of Education, and other organizations to help create equality. There were many leaders during this time like Thurgood Marshall, Rosa Parks, and James Meredith. One way to show how blacks were treated lesser would be how Martin Luther King was a peaceful, nonviolent man and was killed by a white man who didn't share his beliefs. The media changes sense perception and how people perceive others of a different race. A recent study showed that Fox News was more prone to show people of color and the crimes they committed on their network instead of white crimes. Not every single crime that occurs gets reported on the news. Most of the ones that do for the station consist of black people. This also shows how more black-on-black crimes are prevalent, and it makes us think that all blacks are horrible. This changes the perception of black people for every man or woman that watches this news station. Our intuition will change towards these people of color to assume that since the majority of them are bad and commit crimes, then all of them must commit crimes. There could possibly be a reason to why we develop these racial prejudices. This will be unknown to the person who is considered a racist, though. Schemas are cognitive structures that organize knowledge stored in our memory. They are mental representations of categories from our knowledge, beliefs, and expectations about particular aspects of the world, such as people, objects, events, and situations. We then take this information and categorize it into different sets of schemas. One is a social schema. A social schema represents information about groups of people, just like a stereotype. This unknowingly affects how our brain processes situations. Many studies have been done like Bartlett, War of the Ghosts, 1932, Anderson and Pitchard, 1978, Brewers and Trahans, Picnic Basket, 1981, and French and Richards, 1933, to show the validity of this theory. With massive amounts of evidence, schema theory is considered an important theory that provides insight into information processing and behavior. It is unknown whether this theory and set of schemas already produced by a person can be reversed or changed. So this leads to the question, if you're a racist, will you always be a racist? This is why future generations need to be shown that blacks and people of all other races should be considered equal. Parents play a large role in whether or not their child has these mental prejudices towards people of color. There could possibly be a reason to why we develop these racial prejudices. This will be unknown to the person who is considered a racist, though. Schemas are cognitive structures that organize knowledge stored in our memory. They are mental representations of categories. Stereotyping is prevalent today and is influenced by language primarily. This is shown in the example of ride-hailing apps refusing to pick up African Americans because of their language that is presented through their names. Stereotyping is not only shown through language but also through intuition, sense perception, and memory. This can be presented with examples of the LGBTQ, Muslim, African American, and gender role communities that society insists stereotypes upon. Most of the stereotypes are influenced by media, but some are also influenced. While everyone may not share the same opinion and or belief of anyone else, these different stereotypical groups do indeed exist in the real world. There are a multitude of groups now, including, but not limited to, the LGBTQ community, transgenders, African Americans, gender stereotypes, Muslims, and Mexicans. People show anger and hate as a form of emotion in response to their disliking of one's culture. This needs to end. These communities and groups face injustices every day.